I've made a few videos lately about the differences between the special and physical move categories in Pokemon. These videos were limited to specific areas like the splits in Generation 2 and 4, but all the while I was thinking about a bigger, deeper dive into the physical and special move categories. Not status moves. Not yet. This is that video. I loosely wanted to see whether, on balance, one category could be simply better than the other. When I've been watching various challenge and speedruns of Generation 2, the runners often casually state that special types are favoured for a main in a randomizer, with better options and moves available. I took this statement largely at face value for a long time, but I intend to check it today for a few different angles. I'll look at the physical and special categories from every view I can think of, with the caveat that me reading out a bunch of statistics without any nuances or structure would make for a terrible video. In the end, I'll be looking at the bigger trends and nuances that I can see after looking at the data and drawing what conclusions I can from that. While I'm kind of aiming to make the case for physical or special attackers being better or worse than each other in some way, I also kind of think it's impossible for that to be the case, given the niches and nuances and oddities of Pokemon battling that currently exist. Let's get into it. I first looked at the different damage ranges for each move category. In the 0 to 45 group, I made the decision to exclude the multi-hit moves, as most of them hit 2 to 5 times. For moves like Double Slap, there is a 62.5% chance that they will hit more than twice, with chances for crits each time. So being in the 0 to 45 power group didn't make much sense to me. Moves like Dual Wing Beat and Dual Chop also belong in the 50 to 85 group in my view. Excluding those moves, there are significantly more 0 to 45 power and 50 to 85 power physical moves than there are special moves. I think this would align with most people's experience playing the games. More Pokemon get access to a lower power normal move like Tackle or Pound than they do a special type stab attack like Thundershock, Water Gun, or Ember. At the 90 and above group, the balance evens out to 97 special moves to 105 physical moves. The 30 highest power moves are also evenly split at 15 apiece. So higher power moves are evenly balanced and the lower power moves are disproportionately physical, as we might expect from experience. It gets more interesting when you break it down by generation, especially for the lower power move groups. Generation 1 has 33 moves with a power range of 0 to 45, but there's 3 times as many physical moves as there are special moves, compared with less than 2 times the physical moves as special moves in the same power range when you account for all generations. In Generation 1's 50 to 85 group, there's 41 options for physical types and only 8 for special types. This is to be expected. Game Freak has made a deliberate effort over the years to add lower power moves for all types, and thus we have a more rounded balance of them than in the early games. Okay, that's all well and good you say, but did you factor in signature moves? Don't they skew this whole dataset a lot? Good question. I did not initially, but after my conservative count I saw, excluding Z moves and the like, that there are currently 162 damage-dealing signature moves, many of which are really high power. That's actually a really large portion of physical and special moves overall, given there are just under 600 physical and special moves total. Looking at the same parameters again, we get slightly different results. The lower power group only changes slightly since there are fewer lower power signature moves, but the 50 to 85 group goes from 142 physical moves to 128 physical moves, and from 98 special moves to 71 special moves. Quite a shift for special there, but nothing compared to the higher power group. The physical moves decrease from 105 to 74, and the special moves from 97 to 44. We can see that the inclusion of signature moves means a large bump in the number of higher power moves overall, and specifically special moves. A lot of legendary and pseudo-legendary Pokemon have really high-powered signature moves, which really concentrated them in the upper power band. Shockingly, signature moves themselves are evenly split, with 81 physical and special each when you take out signature Z moves like 10 million volt Thunderbolt. This data has some quirks, mostly because of the sheer volume of signature moves introduced in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. In just that game, Pikachu got 4 new signature moves, and Eevee got an unbearable 9 moves. As many people noted on my physical special split video, this significantly skews the options available for electric types. There are 16 physical electric type moves. Of those, 7 of them are signature moves, and 2 of them are Pikachu's signature moves. Also, the fact that there are so many signature moves distorts the data itself quite a bit on a move count basis. For example, 1/3 of all dark type moves are signature moves, nearly half of dragons are signatures, and most of those are special moves. Okay, so physical and special have different numbers of moves and different damage ranges. What about moves that don't have a fixed damage value? Where are the low kicks, the gyro balls, and are they balanced? Not particularly. There are 16 special moves without a specified power and 27 physical moves. I think this is actually an important group of moves, as they use values in the game other than the attack and defense stats to calculate damage. This means they can be used in novel ways that moves with fixed power values cannot. Moves like Super Fang, Counter, and Endeavour can flip battles on their head and can help to break tough walls or neutralize a setup sweeper. And in most cases, these moves lean physical, but it's hard to call this one a win for physical attackers, given what I just said about sidestepping calculations that rely heavily on base stats. For example, Endeavour deals damage based on your current HP, not factoring in defenses, so it doesn't follow that because the moves are mostly physical attackers benefit most from them. Physical attackers might be able to access them slightly more, perhaps. Looking at the numbers in a big picture, overarching dataset sense, we can see that the average power of all special moves is higher than the average power of all physical moves, at 77.78 to 88.54. This is generally true broken down by type as well, with only 4 types having average higher physical damaging moves than special, those being ground, electric, bug, and flying. It's also true divided by generation, with only the physical moves introduced in Generation 6 being on average more powerful than the special moves. So, overwhelmingly special moves tend to be higher power. I think this is mostly explained by those lower power physical moves that tend to dominate the early game, as well as signature special moves being higher power on average than physical moves, at 100 power to 86 power. Even taking out signature moves, special moves are on average 5 power higher than physical, at 71 to 76.97. I like this kind of broad brush analysis because it tends to reinforce what we might intuitively think from years of playing the games, and often reveals some more interesting trends along the way. But we don't play 9 games at once, we play 1. So it's hard to make the case that this information is useful for making decisions about building competitive movesets, or developing teams for challenge runs, or even just choosing moves for a casual playthrough. It's even harder to make the case that special attackers might be superior for a challenge or speedrun just based on numbers alone. I'm going to somewhat try anyway, but more to see if the data supports a compelling case one way or the other. My prior assumption here is that there are actually too many data points and balancing factors for and against to rule one definitively better, but I'll guess I'll find out in the process. I thought about other mechanics a bit and decided to spend some time looking at abilities. I went through and categorized the abilities on whether I thought they generally favored physical or special attackers, and ignored the ones that did not neatly fit into one camp. I did this on a defensive basis primarily, meaning that Intimidate favors special types because they are not negatively affected by it, and no special equivalent exists that lowers special attack. This analysis is also limited by the fact that some abilities only bring physical and special to a par. For example, Inner Focus prevents flinching, and in later generations negates Intimidate. But it's hard to argue that this results in an advantage for physical attackers, since it just brings them up to the same level that special attackers are always at. This categorization yielded a fairly slight trend, since, in my view, about 2/3 of abilities did not favour either physical or special attackers, most commonly because they had an ambivalent effect on dealing damage. Battle Armor blocks critical hits, but all Pokemon are affected by critical hits, so it doesn't really matter in this case. On the other hand, 52 abilities favoured physical and 41 favoured special. Not quite even, but not very heavily tilted in one direction either. While I think these numbers are interesting, I think that a select few abilities have an outsized influence on my answer to the main question. I think that Intimidate and contact-based abilities like Effect Spore or Rough Skin are the biggest differences. Let me explain. Intimidate, for how simple of an ability it is, has a huge effect on how people play competitive Pokemon. Fewer than 50 Pokemon get Intimidate, but competitive staples like Landorus T, Gyarados, and Salamence all get some access, which buffs them immensely. Starting your battle with your opponent immediately down one attack stage, especially in doubles, is invaluable. Intimidate has been one of the best abilities in Pokemon since abilities were introduced, and that isn't likely to change anytime soon. Effect Spore and Rough Skin, or what I will call contact abilities, are not game-breaking, but it's hard to imagine playing Pokemon without them. Making a physical attack inherently worse or more risky simply because it makes contact is not to be underrated. The threat of being afflicted with a non-volatile status condition is enough to force someone to rethink their turn, even in casual play. At the very least, getting staticked in casual play is extremely annoying. But these abilities dominantly affect physical attackers. Special attackers just do not need to worry about contact, as 277 moves make contact and only 7 of them are special moves. And there is no equivalent to Intimidate for special attackers, so it does not concern them. And the things that special attackers don't worry about expands even more when you think about contact broadly. There are 354 physical attacks, 270 of those make contact. That's 3/4 of your total attacks that physical attackers have to worry about possible rough skin and iron barbs, rocky helmets, poisoning, paralysis, burns, sleep, infatuation, aftermath, stats being dropped, your item being stolen, or your ability being deleted. There are some contact abilities that are beneficial to the physical attacker, like Poison Touch and Tough Claws, but they're few and far between compared to the possible detriments. Recoil also largely works against physical attackers with limited effects on special users. Barring a move that has never been legitimately usable in any game, all attacks that cause recoil damage are physical moves. On the one hand, they're all quite high-powered moves, but on the other, that just means more recoil damage if you don't have the ability Rockhead. Arguably, special moves like Draco Meteor or Overheat have a kind of recoil, and that the special attack stat is sharply lowered, but that's quite distinct from actual damage in my view. Also, it can be counteracted with items like a White Herb, or flipped on its head with abilities like Contrary. In some cases, like Flare Blitz and Brave Bird, the recoil damage is large enough to be a deterrent from using those moves altogether. Brave Bird inflicts 1/3 of the damage dealt to the opponent on the user, compared with 1/4 for moves like Takedown. The opposite cannot be said for moves like Leaf Storm or Superpower, where the recoil is substantial but can be mitigated or neutralized altogether by simply swapping out. This is even more viable when you consider how many Pokemon access moves such as U-Turn or Volt Switch, which makes swapping even easier. Yes, some mitigation is possible with moves that recover HP or held items like Leftovers or a Citrus Berry, but it's still damage taken that special attackers just do not have to deal with. I've looked at the question from some different angles in this video, and a lot of them can be argued one way or the other to make the case that one move category is better than the other. While looking at numbers and extrapolating is fun and good, I think it would be missing the forest for the trees, and that one move category really can't be better than the other because they're not meant to be. They're intended to be balanced, but in an asymmetric way. If they were symmetrically balanced, we would have an Intimidate-like ability that lowers special attack. If they were symmetrically balanced, there would be a special attack pure power and some kind of special contact mechanic and so on and so forth. If they were symmetrically balanced, there wouldn't be opportunities and niches for physical Pokemon to exploit physical defense and specially walling Pokemon. On a micro level, Chansey would somehow tank physical moves. On a macro level, there'd be no incentive to invest in weird stat spreads that break the meta. Based solely on the numbers, special attackers should just be better. They have higher average power attacks across nearly all possible categories and generations. They don't deal with contact or recoil or intimidate. Burns do not cut their attack. I could go on. But people routinely make use of physical attackers in competitive and casual play, despite their numerous specific challenges. I know that some people are critical of the way that the current physical special split incentivizes heavy effort value investment in either special or physical attack to the detriment of mixed attackers. But a symmetrical balance between physical and special would probably just incentivize a bunch of bland mixed attackers in a way that isn't very gratifying. The slight lean special in a lot of areas is more than offset by the unique opportunities that presents physical attackers, or mold-breaking Pokemon to subvert expectations. Looking at the numbers, it might seem a bit unbalanced, and like special should ultimately win out. But looking at people's competitive sets, that asymmetry shines through, and physical attackers have a strong place in every team. Their balance is in the fact that they are fundamentally different, rather than statistical mirrors of each other. If I can distill my thoughts into an aphorism, it's that the difference between physical and special Pokemon does not mean that they are unequal. In this video, I stated many times that special attackers do have some advantages over physical attackers. But, and I have to stress this, most of that data is based on a broad sweep of averages that do not take specific context into account. Like I said, looking at big trends and averages is fun, but it definitely limits the kind of conclusions that you can draw from them. In this case, the specific context is that there is an abundance of highly competitive, interesting, and varied physical attackers to match the equal number of comparable special attackers. At the top levels of the game, there is no shortage of good physical attackers to counter special attackers, even if they are in many respects better on paper. Whether the average power of physical attacks is lower than the average power of special attacks will not change that. Yeah, there might be a great many terrible physical attackers and moves and abilities, but when you're outside the start of most games, you don't pay much attention to them, even if they bring the averages down a lot. For those of you saying, okay, what's the point then? Why did you make this video if you were just going to argue that there couldn't be a stronger attacking class? Which is a valid question, but I would point back to the fact that I wanted to test a theory with data. What I heard was, special attackers are better generally, and I wanted to know if this claim was supported by data and game mechanics. I found that it wasn't, and I don't think you can make that case overall, even if there are some compelling points against physical attackers that I have outlined here. Other people may disagree with me, and that's okay. I will also note at this point that none of this factors in Pokemon that are intended to be status walls, which are used in entirely different ways and don't focus on direct dealing of damage. There are plenty of higher powered physical and special attackers who are entirely stumped by stall strategies like Toxic Protect, Prankster sets, or entry hazard walls like Toxapex. This video also hasn't taken much cognizance of stat spreads, because I'm not sure how much they would really add. But for posterity, I will note that the average special attack stat of all Pokemon is actually lower than attack at 87.22 compared to attack's 96.31. This is also true if you exclude Mega Evolutions, which lowers the average special attack to 85.75 and the average attack to 94.14. This is also true when divided by type, with exceptions in the case of Fire, Electric, Psychic, Ghost, and Fairy. So maybe physical attackers are better able to pack a punch with their higher power moves, but I'd say a deeper analysis is needed here to really substantiate that claim. I also did not discuss weather and terrain effects in any detail here, mostly because I'm of the view that after Generation 4, they mostly affect special and physical attackers equally. Pre-split, they undoubtedly favour special attackers, mostly from rain and harsh sunlight, with hail and sandstorm taking a back seat. Rain's boost to water moves, bypassing of Thunder's accuracy check, and neutralising of fire-type attacks is not to be underrated, and the reverse is true for harsh sunlight. Hail and Sandstorm are a bit more neutral in my view, and lend themselves more to chip damage and longer battles than dealing lots of direct damage. Pre-split, the benefits are mostly for special attackers, but after Generation 4, I think they're about even. Gyarados' Aqua Tail gets the 50% boost all the same as Swampit's Surf. Also, while looking at weather, I noticed yet another Diamond and Pearl-centric oddity. In those games only, Thunder and Blizzard have a 30% chance to hit through Protect or Detect when used in Rain or Hail each. Neat, but weird that it was just Diamond and Pearl and not the rest of the Generation 4 games. Anyway, I just thought I'd better mention weather here, lest someone yells at me in the comments. And that's all I had, folks. What do you make of the difference between physical and special attackers? Do you think that special actually wins out in the end? Let me know in the comments below. I am, as always, very open to the idea that I got something or everything wrong, and would like to hear your thoughts if you think so. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, it helps the channel out a bunch. I've also been speedrunning a lot lately over on Twitch, so follow me there if you want to chat between videos. Thanks for watching, see you next time.